Over the weekend, 15 black medical students from Tulane University posed outside the slave quarters of a Louisiana plantation, and the image is making a splash online. Ron Allen is with me now, and Ron, last we checked, the tweet had more than 18,000 retweets, 73,000 likes.
And
this is obviously it's going up, right?
And going up. It's a very emotional thing, and it's you're showing me a picture. I hope it's a very stark contrast, and it's black and white, and it's very, very emotional. I've talked to people around here and elsewhere who are just very moved by this. It's 15 medical students, black medical students. They're wearing their white coats, which is, of course, the symbol of being a doctor, and they're standing on the porch in front of a slave quarters at a plantation. And the message, the loudest message is, "We are truly our ancestors' wildest dreams." Now that's pretty plain and simple and powerful, and you can think about the broader context of this, how few black doctors there are in the country, minority doctors, period.
Yeah.
And these young people are, they're 200 years ago, they would have been in a completely different situation. And that's not that long ago.
It's an incredible image. I mean, it just says so much. Ron, I know you've done a lot of reporting on the lack of diversity in the medical community, specifically the low number of black men in medical school. Could you talk to us more about that?
Well, the most stark number is that in the 1970s, 1980s, there were 550 black men in medical schools in the country.
That's it?
Out of about 20,000.
That's wild.
Well, no, what's even wilder is that now there are fewer than that.
Oh,
all these years later, 40 years later. And it's a lot of things. It's the cost. It's the 9 years of schooling. A lot of black men are under pressure to get a job after college for socioeconomic reasons. It can be, but the one big reason is that there are no role models. Many young black men grow up never seeing a black doctor, which is why seeing those 15 people, and out of those 15 doctors, only 2 were men and the other 13 were women. There's a general rise in the number of black doctors, but it's because of women, not because of men. So, at so many levels, this picture is just the old cliche worth many, many thousands of words. They said they want it to be motivational. They want it to be inspiring, not just to others, but to each other and to people like them. And it's really gotten a lot of attention.
It certainly is. I mean, let's talk too about the implications. I mean, to have such a lack of diversity in the medical community, surely is not a good thing.
No, well, as you know, there are different health outcomes for different communities, for women, for men, for people who are black, white, Hispanic, Asian, what have you, because medical care is intimate, and people like to be cared for by somebody who's like them. And with so few black doctors, many people think that that's contributed to poor health outcomes, preventable diseases. And the most stark statistic is that black male life expectancy, the ultimate health, is 6 years shorter than the rest of the population. 6 years. That's a lot of colonoscopies that don't happen. That's a lot of other kinds of screens that don't happen. And so that's the underlying thing, but which is very important. But the bottom line is this picture, behind it, the stories as you talk to the students, it's all about just motivation. It's all about inspiring. It's all about trying to just show people that you can be me. And they just went out one day. It's a plantation outside of their Tulane Medical School. It's a plantation nearby. They went out there to pose for pictures, and wow. What happened? Look what happened. It's
amazing. I can hardly imagine that medical students who are so inspirational will be done with this one photo. Any sense of what is next for them? I imagine they're going to continue trying to inspire people. Well, they want to get this photo into schools around the country. Okay. Their goal is 100,000. I think with this social media hit, they're going to be that won't be hard. That won't be hard at all. And it's not just medical schools. It's all kinds of schools, because they want students to see this. They want it's all about inspiring. It's all about motivating kids. It's all about showing kids that you can be us, and you can be this, and dreaming and believing. And it's really when you think about what they're doing out there, it's so plain. And I think because they're wearing white coats, it's a black and white picture for the most part. They're people of color. It's just stark and simple, and the message is plain and clear. Yeah, I mean, dream big. Dream. It is. You bring that up because you look at it. Sometimes people think things need to be so stylized, so dramatic. Right. So it is the simplicity, I think, of both, just the imagery and also their message in this tweet that I think people really connect to. I mean, you mentioned it. Our ancestors, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Yeah, well, imagine that. Because again, going back, 200 years, maybe not even that far, when there were
was Jim Crow, at least in America. If you were growing up at that time, you think about what you were dreaming. You were dreaming of freedom. You were dreaming of just survival for the most part, not becoming a doctor. I mean, but beyond this, there is the real situation of just the paucity, the dearth, the not a lot of doctors out there who are people of color. And hopefully that will change. It's a really tough thing to do. I mean, do you want to go to 9 years of school?
No, I know a whole lot. Everyone thinks it's glamorous to be a doctor, right? But I have a whole lot of friends going through the process. It is tough. It is grueling. They work hard. And
it's rewarding, and it's all those things too. And also, one student we talked to said he was going to graduate with like $200,000 in debt. But there are medical schools like Morehouse and Spelman and Tulane that are trying to change this. There are people out there who see what's going on, and they are trying to change it.
And that photo, that tweet, Ron, certainly a big step, inspiring a lot of young people. We know that's where the kids are, right? They're on social media, and so maybe some kids are seeing that today and thinking, I could be that too. That's incredible. Ron, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.